So now back to the course. So this course provides a comprehensive overview of what you need to help your older students master their goals and achieve generalization. There are 3 primary sections. Section 1 deals primarily with development. So you'll learn about cognitive and linguistic development, as well as a wide range of other areas that are really relevant to your practice and that will help inform your treatment planning process. Section 2 focuses on intervention. We'll talk about relationship building and goal writing, as well as specific therapy approaches that work well for older students, as well as generalization. And finally, Section 3 really gives you specific tools that you can use to educate and to involve families and caregivers and even staff as they support the older children that you're all caring for, so you can all work as a team together. Adolescent language development is a more gradual process than early language development. This probably doesn't come as a surprise to you because so much changes so rapidly during those early years. But even though the process is more gradual, it's still filled with milestones that are quite important. While younger children tend to rely on spoken communication for language stimulation, older children often use reading to further develop their language. And I think that's really important to be cognizant of as we work with older kids because there is a big shift there. And we want to be sure to use literature and texts as we work on language goals with them. Adolescents develop linguistic individualism, which reflects their unique interests and knowledge of vocabulary in areas they would like to learn more about. And you see, as kids get older, they become more independent and they become more of an individual. And that's reflected in their language development. And so I love this because it highlights the importance of tailoring our instruction to our students' interests whenever possible. So for example, rather than taking out any arbitrary reading passage, we want to always try to choose high interest topics when we can. Older children develop meta-linguistic competence, which allows them to reflect on their own understanding and use of each language domain. And if I could put a star next to this one, I really would. Meta-linguistic competence, which I'll discuss in more detail in the intervention section, is a tremendous gift for us to work with that we don't have as much of with younger kids. Older students develop the capability to reflect on their understanding of language, and the implications for that are huge. So here's a specific exercise I created for my students. I encourage you to try it out because I think you'll find that it really helps to bridge that gap between their communication goals and their personal ones. It also makes the whole process have a bit of a more collaborative feel. Now, of course, you're ultimately the one who makes all the decisions, but involving your students in this way can be very meaningful. So let's look at each prompt. So the first one says, what's your dream job? What would go on your vision board? So let's go back to my former student whose dream job was becoming a journalist. What kinds of speech and language skills do you need for that to happen? Well, to be a journalist, you have to be able to provide a thoughtful summary of past events, use grammatically correct sentences that include the correct past tense verb tenses. From a semantic point of view, they have to be able to concisely summarize past events and include the most salient information and provide relevant details. They also need to engage in perspective taking to be aware of what their listener might want to know. And in addition, if they're verbally reporting news, they need to have an appropriate speech rate, use clear and intelligible speech, and proper vocal volume. So you can see here how many skills are needed and how this question can set off some light bulb moments for students. What are your favorite subjects in school? What are you good at? So this helps them to focus on some positives that they can capitalize on. What areas feel more challenging? What speech and language goals are related to these challenges? I think that's helpful for them to, again, make that connection between the speech and language skills and what feels challenging at school. Why do you come to speech? At this point in the process, hopefully your students have been making some valuable connections and have a clearer understanding as to why they're working with you. And finally, How could your speech and language goals help with your bigger life goals? So again, I think this really helps to take the time at the beginning of the process of working with your students to talk through this exercise. So I really encourage you to try this out with your own students. Morphology and Latin root words. This is something I'm going to elaborate more on in the next slide because it's a powerful way to approach vocabulary instruction with our older students. It would be great if there were enough time to teach our students every single word out there, but we have to select words that we think will have the greatest impact. If we teach them the meaning of morphological word units, prefixes, suffixes, and Latin roots, then we're automatically expanding our instruction to larger groups of words that share the same word units. This approach reminds me of how we use context clues within sentences to figure out word meanings. In this case, students learn to use clues within the words themselves to determine word meanings. As an example, when students know that ben means good and they see a word like benevolent, they can infer its meaning along with other words like benefit, benign, and benefactor. That can really help them to create semantic webs and understand relationships between words as well, which is immensely valuable.